Hello, how are y'all doing? I wanted to give you some notes over part five of The Whistler. Well, it's called The Whistler, and then there's some other. Anyway, if you are following along on your PDF that has the study guide on it, um, it'll be the part that says part five at the very top of it. But the first question is, how does the foreshadowing of Rudy's death affect the reader? So we can find that on page 241 of your book. And if I go to page 241 in the dark bolded, which we know is death speaking directly to us, we see that Rudy dies. So what effect does that have on us as a reader? Well, for one thing, you kind of get a little sad, right? You have a little emotion there. But also, I want to know, wait a minute, what? How does he die? Does he die because he joins the military? Does he die because uh, he got sick? Why does he die? The foreshadowing causes the reader to feel tension and sorrow while reading about Liesel and Rudy's relatively lighthearted friendship. So it's kind of a paradox, right? You have this dark um, idea that Rudy's death is coming, um, and then you have this lighthearted friendship as well. But we still don't know at this point exactly how he dies. Rudy's hopes of Liesel kissing him have a newfound sense of urgency because the reader knows that his life will be short. At the same time, death forces the reader to understand that Liesel will not kiss Rudy until after he dies. So for me, that lets me know, okay, well, they don't grow up and get married because they would probably kiss before they were married, right? So I know I can infer that he's probably going to die young, and because one of the things that this book kind of hammers home to us and tells us, and death tells us, is that we are all going to die. Period. If you are born, you will die. That is that is the way it is, right? So that makes it, okay, so Rudy dies. Well, so guess what? I'm gonna die too. So it makes you think, well, when is he going to die? Well, when we find out that he never kisses, I can infer that he probably dies young. The next question is, explain the significance of the title of the chapter, The Gamblers, a seven-sided die, and note how the structure of the chapter reflects the title. And I'm sure you noticed that in your reading, each little piece of that chapter had a little picture of dice and like a little subtitle, right? So the name of the chapter is The Gamblers, a seven-sided die, but then there's these parts, the haircut, the newspaper, and so on. So there's that. Um, and it's also a metaphor. The dice is a metaphor. It's most commonly used in gambling, and the one that is most commonly used in gambling is only a six-sided die. But seven is traditionally a lucky number, so there's actually a smaller chance of rolling a seven with a seven-sided die. You only have a 1 in 7 chance of rolling it than there is of rolling a more traditional pair of dice. There would be a 1 in 6 chance. So in this section, however, 7 is unlucky, which is sometimes the case in the game of craps. The seven-sided die probably suggests that the odds of succeeding are against the gamblers. So who are the gamblers? That's the Hubermans, because they're the ones who are gambling on having a Jew in their basement. The chapter is structured around the die metaphor and divided into 7 sections, with each introduced by a picture of a dice with a progression of 1 to 7 dots on it. The construct of this chapter serves to highlight seven major events that result from this gamble. The gamble being having Max in their home, each marking an important milestone in Max and Liesel's growing friendship. So Max gets his hair cut, Liesel cuts his hair. Liesel brings thrown away newspapers to Max so he can read them and complete the crossword puzzles if they're not already done. Sometimes when you're using used newspapers, people have already done the crossword puzzles. Then he gets a description of the weather outside from Liesel, and he draws a picture reflecting on this. And the picture could be interpreted two ways. It could be interpreted in a hopeful manner, or it could be interpreted in an ominous manner. Max fantasizes about fighting Hitler, but a figure like Liesel bringing him the crossword puzzles saves him from the angry mob. Then number 5, Max shares his fantasy of fighting Hitler with Liesel, and he continues to train. So he's down there cold and starving to death, but every day he's training to fight Hitler. Hans, Rosa, and Liesel join Max in painting over pages of Mein Kampf so Max can write another book. He writes the book is called The Word Shaker. The Hermans fire Rosa and Liesel, and Liesel has an angry verbal confrontation with Ilse. So those are the 7 important things that are going to happen in this chapter. Question number 3 is a question about metafiction. And so I wanted you to look at page 243. And if you will look at page 243, the very beginning of this chapter, The Gamblers, it says, "Of course I'm being rude. I'm spoiling the ending, not only of the entire book, but of this particular piece of it. I have given you 2 events in advance because I don't have much interest in building mystery. Mystery bores me. It chores me. I know what happens, and so do you. It's the machinations that will us there that aggravate, perplex, interest, and astound me. There are many things to think of. There is much story." So what purpose does this serve for the genre of metafiction? Well, it's obvious that we have this direct address to the reader, so we know it's metafiction because of that. But also, we have this facetiousness here. He says, I don't have much interest in building mystery. And he says, mystery bores me. Well, first of all, that's not true. Mystery doesn't bore him. And he has built up mystery by giving us these events in advance. If we know Rudy's going to die, the mystery is, how does he die? When does he die? Right? So he is building up mystery, even though he's saying, not so much about the whole building mystery thing. And he's being facetious. From the beginning of the novel, Death has emphasized that he is telling a story and that he is in control of the story and how it will be told. There have been flash forwards and references to future events throughout. When he says, after half-heartedly apologizing for spoiling the end of the story, mystery bores me, it chores me, he elaborates by saying, I know what happens, and so do you. The plot, what is going to happen, is not what is important. The narrator reminds us that we are not supposed to get caught up in the storyline. Instead, he wants us to focus on how the events transpire, what seemingly unconnected or unrelated issues combine to create seemingly inevitable results. As is the case in most examples of metafiction, Zuzak does not want the story of Max and Liesel to be reduced to a study of only plot, character, setting, and theme. Now, all of those things are important: plot, character, setting, and theme. That's what a book is. But he's wanting us to think about the events that lead to um, the plot of the book, and how things in our lives can come together for unexpected consequences, and that's a part of metafiction. So while we know, because there's a direct address to the reader here, that this is an element of metafiction, more importantly, what we should be getting out of this is that there is more to the story than just plot, character, setting, and theme. It is these unconnected events or unrelated issues that combine to create seemingly inevitable results. Inevitable means what? Inevitable means that's going to happen and there's nothing anybody can do to stop it. Okay, good. All right, let's go to page 249. So on page 249, I'm going to read just a tiny bit of this to you down at the very bottom, the very last paragraph, the second sentence. It says, on the wall, he painted a long, tightly knotted rope with a dripping yellow sun at the end of it, as if you could dive right into it. On the ropey cloud he drew two figures, a thin girl, a withering Jew, and they were walking, arms balanced, toward the dripping sun. Beneath the picture he wrote the following sentence, the wall-written words of Max Vandenberg. It was a Monday, and they walked on a tightrope to the sun. Okay, so what has happened here? Well, before this, Liesel has played soccer and she scored a goal and she came in and she was so excited. She told her parents about scoring the goal, but then she goes downstairs and she talks to what is now her friend, Max, and says, hey, you're not going to believe what happened to me at soccer today. I totally scored a goal, and is telling them all about it. And Max says, will you do me a favor? Yeah, you scored a goal. That's great. But I don't know what even the world looks like down here. I don't know if you scored that goal in the sunshine, if you scored it in the rain. I don't know if it was a cloudy day. I don't know what was going on. Can you tell me what the weather was like? So Liesel, being a child, runs back up the stairs, looks outside, and gets a really good picture in her mind of what the weather looks like that day. She comes back down the stairs and she tells him this is what the weather was like. He takes that description and then he draws this picture. So let's see what the answer key tells us to think about that. It says the painting depicts a thin girl and a withering Jew. We can suppose that that is Liesel and Max. They're on a tightrope walking into the sun. So what is a tightrope? So it's a rope that is stretched tight between two places very far apart. And in order to walk on this tightrope, you have to, a lot of times, have on no shoes or special shoes. And you have to almost use your toes to cling onto the rope. And a lot of times, you'll have something to balance yourself with so that you don't fall, right? So you have to have great balance. You have to have nimble feet. And you have to have the proper motivation to get from one side to the other. And you have to have some courage, and you have to have some luck. So when I think about this description of a tightrope, I think about the tightrope that the Hubermans are walking by having Max there, right? The tightrope that Liesel is walking by keeping this secret, but still trying to give Max the best life that she knows how to give him by bringing him newspapers, by telling him what the weather's like. So the painting can be looked at in two ways. On one hand, we see this scene of liberation. Two damaged people, each a prisoner in his or her own way, have found their freedom and are walking into the glorious sun. On the other hand, both victims of Nazi ideology and policy are walking a tightrope. Metaphorically, this could indicate the difficult path that they are following and the extreme caution with which they need to proceed. They are walking to the sun, which could metaphorically represent the gas chamber and crematorium that await a Jew in hiding and the girl who helped him if they were ever caught. So the sun can represent freedom, but it can also represent this death, right? And so that is this big paradox and metaphor, and it's just great, honestly, the way that the author puts this in here. Um, so it gives you a way to look at this from either the glass is half full or the glass is half empty, right? So you can look at this as an optimist or as a pessimist. All right, good. Let's do a couple of more. I'm going to finish with this one because we're about out of time. I don't want to make these videos longer than 20 minutes. But let's look at question number 5, and we're going to go to page 253 to 254. Okay, and it says, what does Max's boxing fantasy reveal about his psychological and emotional state? How does it reflect the reality of Max's situation? So I'm going to start down here on page 253, about halfway through, and I'm going to read a little and then we'll talk about it just a little. Slowly, Max Vandenberg, the Jew, rose to his feet and made himself upright. His voice wobbled, an invitation. Come on, Fuhrer, he said. And this time, when Adolf Hitler set upon his Jewish counterpart, Max stepped aside and plunged him into the corner. He punched him 7 times, aiming on each occasion for only one thing, the mustache. With the 7th punch, he missed. It was the Fuhrer's chin that sustained the blow. All at once, Hitler hit the ropes and creased forward, landing on his knees. This time there was no count. The referee flinched in the corner. The audience sank down, back to their beer. On his knees, the Fuhrer tested himself for blood and straightened his hair right to left. When he returned to his feet, much to the approval of the 1,000-strong crowd, he edged forward and did something quite strange. He turned his back on the Jew and took the gloves from his fist. The crowd was stunned. He's given up, someone whispered, but within moments, Adolf Hitler was standing on the ropes, and he was addressing the arena. My fellow Germans, he called, you can see something here tonight, can't you? Bare-chested, victory-eyed, he pointed over at Max. You can see that what we face is something far more sinister and powerful than we ever imagined. Can you see that? They answered, Yes, Fuhrer. Can you see that this enemy has found its ways, its despicable ways, through our armor, and that clearly I cannot stand up here alone and fight him? The words were visible. They dropped from his mouth like jewels. Look at him. Take a good look. They looked at the bloodied Max Vandenberg. As we speak, he is plotting his way into your neighborhood. He's moving in next door. He's infesting you with his family, and he's about to take you over. Hitler glanced at him with disgust. He will soon own you until it is he who stands at the counter of your grocery shop but sits in the back, smoking his pipe. Before you know it, you'll be working for him at minimum wage while he can hardly walk from the weight in his pockets. Will you simply stand there and let him do this? Will you stand by, as your leaders did in the past, when they gave your land to everybody else, when they sold your country for the price of a few signatures? Will you stand out there powerless? Or, and now he stepped one rung higher, will you climb into this ring with me? Max shook. Horror stuttered in his stomach. Adolf finished him. Would you climb in here so that we can defeat this enemy together? In the basement of 33 Himmel Street, Max Vandenberg could feel the fist of an entire nation. One by one, they climbed into the ring and beat him down. They made him bleed. They let him suffer, millions of them, until one last time, when he gathered himself to his feet, he watched the next person climb through the ropes. It was a girl, and she slowly crossed the canvas. He noticed a tear torn down her left cheek. In her right hand was a newspaper. "The crossword," she gently said, "is empty." And she held it out to him. Dark. Nothing but dark now. Just basement. Just Jew. So he's had this fantasy of fighting the Fuhrer, like literally fist fighting the Fuhrer. And because he has more heart, more soul, more want to than the Fuhrer does, he has taken him down, right? Not only that, let's be honest, Max probably has a little hate too, right? Because he keeps punching that mustache. That mustache is this symbol to him. This is the thing that is causing all of my problems. Let's read what this says here. It says the fantasy reveals the extent to which Max feels alone and helpless, ill prepared and ill equipped. This hopelessness is exasperated by the referee's willingness to let Hitler cheat. From the beginning, the conflict between the Nazis and the Jews has been unfair, and the odds are against Max. The aloneness and unfairness are intensified by Hitler's appeal to the audience. Max has gathered all of his strength, has risen from near defeat, only to have his opponent reinforced by the fist of an entire nation. However, the fact that Max fantasizes about such a fight reminds the reader that he is a fighter. He would never simply surrender. He refuses to admit defeat while he is able to stand, even against the fist of an entire nation. Finally, the end of the fight and the end of the fantasy, when the girl comes in and gives him a newspaper with a blank crossword puzzle, shows the extent to which Max relies on Liesel's care and support. He cannot defeat the entire Nazi nation, but somehow Liesel's presence makes it more bearable. The reality of Max's situation is challenging, but Max is not as alone and friendless as he seems to feel. It is likely that a good part of excuse me, it is likely that a good part of this feeling of aloneness is his own self-loathing. The idea that he does not deserve friends or assistance and that he is selfish to endanger those who are helping him. So, hope this lecture helped you a little bit with your study guide, and we'll talk again.